The Brooklyn Housing Authority Board of Commissioners meeting of Thursday, December 12th, 24 is called to order. In attendance, the Commissioners Conway, O'Donnell, and Sonia, thus a quorum is present. Executive Director Correnti is also present. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Please join us in singing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, a couple of quick announcements before we proceed to the agenda. So we recently learned that Commissioner Moschner has resigned her position effective December 9th to this board. Although her tenure was brief, we certainly appreciate the contribution she's made. We look forward, she's still a resident. We look forward to working with her on anything that might come up from the board. Sure, just announcing that Commissioner Moschner has resigned her position, which of course will trigger, she's the tenant commissioner, and of course everyone will be duly notified that way as well. And then the second thing, we just learned that Governor Healy has appointed David Gagliardi as the governor's appointment to the board. So many of you may know David from his involvement in the town. We certainly appreciate his involvement now and look forward to working with him. Meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we accept and place on file the November 14th, 2024 minutes for the Brooklyn Housing Authority.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. I'm sorry?
Budget.
You got it. Sorry about that. We're gonna change the agenda up a little bit here.
Sorry.
The FY25 budget is up.
Paul Levy is here, you know, Paul, he's a partner at Ewald. At Ewald's fee account, they handle our accounting. And they're one of the biggest around here, like 90 housing authorities. Paul covers 15 of them. Most of them not sure. And he's, involved working with us on the budget. This year, it's a slight twist. I'll give a brief overview and then Paul will dig into it. The change this year, as you probably remember from years past, concerning maintenance. Maintenance rates set by the Department of Labor. And historically, the Department of Labor would send out a letter. We register the positions that we have, which are two maintenance positions. And they would send a letter out within the February timeframe, and that would be the rate that those positions would be paid effective April 1st. And the rule was you couldn't pay less and you couldn't pay more. Well, since the pandemic is come and gone and people are trying to get caught up and everything, a lot of things are happening in the industry. And some of those things are, number one, costs are escalating substantially for materials and things. And then number two, the Department of Labor rates have not kept up with COLA, cost of living adjustments. In the past few years, I don't have it in front of me, they go up like 1.5%, and the cost of living would be 2.5% to 3.5%. This year, the cost of living for Social Security, which is what's used, is 2.5%. What DHCD, now known as the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, has done is they've come forward with some guidelines. And they came out saying that the budget can go up 9%, but in business, if you had a budget of $1 million, I think we'll go up 9% of $1 million. Well, the housing authority budget doesn't work that way, as Paul might allude to, because whatever the number is for the total budget, there are items in there that can go off to the side, and that increase can only affect a segment of the budget. It's called the annual non-utility expense level. So utilities, certain other things are off to the side. They can come and go up based upon the market conditions. So we have a smaller amount to work with, all right? And once they came out with that, then they realized a couple of days later that people had different impressions of what it meant, and they came up with clarifications. And the clarification really bottoms out as to. If you look at the budget, you have a column for maintenance, which includes salary, overtime, seasonal workers,
On call.
on call, and all those, that whole column could not increase by 9%. But when you factor in the rest of the budget that can change, if you go up 9% for the salaries here, you're gonna have to make an adjustment on another line in that column. You're aware of the seasonal workers or something, make an adjustment, so it's really tied in. He'll explain that a little briefly. That's a big change in the budget. And any increase that's in the budget would go back now to July 1, which is the start of the fiscal year, whereas before it was April. Now that they're doing that, no one knows what they're gonna do next year, but most likely now that they've opened the gate, they'll have to stay with this type of system. Because next year, the Department of Labor rate certainly not gonna go up by a big number, and most of the people will be beyond that. And so the Department of Labor rate will probably become like the threshold, to hire someone. And the other impact of all this, it then means that a housing authority can pay people different amounts in that category. If I was working here for 20 years and I'm getting this rate that the Department of Labor had, and you were hired, you had to, for that category, you had to get the same rate. Well, now, just like business, you might come in at a lower rate and earn it as you go based on your performance. So we're small, it's only 3 people. If you had a housing authority that had 20, 30, a larger number, there's a lot more adjustments you can make as you're dealing with a pot. It's made up of larger numbers. So that's a big change. I think it's good, the recognition that what's happened in the past just wasn't right, if you will. People were falling behind based upon the increases the Department of Labor was giving and the actual cost of living increase. So, he'll explain all that. We did make another change in it, and that was, we had a line item for aluminum siding at a 7 high Trouble Cove Road. And I think it was 40,000 we had in there. And we just got to a point this year, thinking things through and doing some investigation. All the houses, we provide a lawnmower and cut the grass, tenant. Well, you give them a brand new lawnmower, stolen, or the next week it will come back broken. More importantly, there's a liability. Someone chucked off their finger. We're liable. So, you realize that, called around, what other people do. So what we're gonna do is, we went out, had a couple of landscapers bid on it. One did not respond, 2 did bid. And we had 2 bids, one is like 38,000, and the other one I think is 56,000. And what that is the landscaper company is gonna take care of the houses that we have, not here, not 13, not the tower, just the houses. Spring cleanup, breaking duck and getting rid of the leaves, fall cleanup, one fertilization, and mowing the lawn. Some houses maybe every 2 weeks and whatever. That eliminates everything. We thought of trying to hire a couple of people, but you hire 2 seasonal workers if they're not over a certain age, they shouldn't be driving on trucks. We tie things up. We're gonna be shuttling people around. This is the easiest way, just offload it. We're done with it. So what we were able to do is we took the siding out and put the landscaping in the budget. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply in the modernization program next year for the siding to be covered by the state. We didn't have the ability to date to do it, but we'll find a way to weasel it into to our request. So those are the 2 biggies to really cover. Bring up something this discussion, but the bottom line, he can go over the percentage of what we did with maintenance and the staff and all that. So Feel free to ask questions, that's why Paul's here.
I'll try to do a quick overview as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
They're not shy.
I thought you did it already. I thought you were going home.
You only two things.
Not joking.
No, that's fair. No, I want to thank Bob, Erica, Debbie, the whole team, you know, the maintenance guys too, you know, they work really hard every year. They provide me with financial information every month. So that way I can turn around, and give you guys the financial statements on a timely basis. So I definitely want to thank them up front. As far as the budget right here, as far as this, there's a lot of pages here, but really it's fairly straightforward, similar to what I've talked about in past years. So what I'm going to do is just highlight for you guys just some differences, some things that we've either changed or the regulations have changed. But for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward budget compared to previous years. On page one, this is again, the summary of the entire budget. So every single page after this feeds into page one. As far as the different programs, I'll just quickly go over each column. The first column on the left is your 4001, your state housing program. That's 13 River, that's Talbot, and then your scattered family units at different addresses. Second column is what's called 6672. That's really 16 River Street. That's your new construction substantial rehab project. So that's a section 8 back project. So that's a good project because it's contract rents from HUD. And every month you get a pretty big sizable subsidy from HUD. So that's also your health program. Then 689, that's Parker House in McCullough. It's a pretty small program. Your affordable program, these are the actual units that you own and manage, and you get a section 8 voucher. So you get all the benefits of owning these 4 units. There's one at Glenside Ave and 3 at Mason. And then your only federal program, and this is the only program where you don't own the properties, is that 5th column, what's labeled HCVP. That's the section 8 program. So that's landlord vouchers, where the housing authority gets vouchers to help subsidize tenants that live within the community. And the vouchers are sent to landlords to help subsidize the tenant rents. So we'll talk a little bit about that one. That one's managed by Dedham Housing Authority. I think you're going on maybe your 4th year of them managing it. So it's a little more simple than if you were just managing it yourself. I will point out on the far right side, your total funds available, think of that as your total revenue, is going up a pretty healthy 13.6%. It's almost 14%. Then if we go way down to the bottom, the total routine expenses, it's a little more than halfway down. Think of the total routine expenses as your normal operating expenses for the year. So salaries, maintenance, insurance, employee benefits, just things that really provide 1 year of value because they're just your normal expenses for the year. That's going up 9.2%. So it's nice to see, you know, it's not the case every year, but the projected revenues are certainly outpacing the increases in expenses. You know, certainly room to fluctuate either way, but it's a good start for a good budget. And then after the routine expenses, I always talk about this section is the non-routine expenses. It's like Bob will talk about the landscaping. This is really where you choose to spend your reserves, both anything that you don't spend in the current year, plus reserves from prior years that you've banked. And I always say this is kind of where you get the most bang for your buck because these are really capital improvement projects outside of your normal capital plan, your normal fish or mod work plan, whatever term you choose to call that. So these are your expenses where you might be fixing a unit that needs to be turned over, maybe some, you know, parking lot repairs and roofing repairs, whatever comes up. You know, we try to put as much as we can feasibly put in there for things that we know, as well as a cushion for other things, just based on where the reserves are. So think of that as kind of pretty sizable chunk of reserves being spent almost every single year. Bob and team come in under that. So it's really just a barometer for how much you can spend of your reserves. And then I'll draw your attention to the second to last line at the bottom. That's really the key point of this entire page is what is your reserve percentage? So that first column on the left, the 4001, that's the only program that has a required reserve. The reserve that's required is 35%. And this housing authority is essentially fluctuate anywhere from 36% up to 50%. You know, I've only really seen it as high as 50% once. That was kind of during the pandemic phase where nobody was spending money. So that was a bit of an outlier. So I would say if we end the year at a 38% reserve, that's a good enough cushion. I think we ended last year at 37%. You know, you're kind of essentially operating this program as you get funding in and spending the funding that you get, trying to build up small amounts of reserves in case you need it for future expenses. The rest of the reserve percentages, as you can see, are pretty high, other than, you know, the affordable column. I think that's a little bit of a unusual thing to see, the negative 700%. What it really means is that most of your reserves in this program are invested in the property itself. You don't have a ton of extra reserves to spend on additional expenses. But I will point out, this is kind of the first year we're seeing this. That program is budgeted to make 32,000. You know, off of 4 units, just 4 units. You know, so you're getting the full voucher there, the tenant rent there, and it's all coming into you. So For those 4 units, that's not a sizable increase, because in past years, we had to budget so much fixing up the property. So my hope is, and I'm sure Bob hopes this too, is that now you're gonna see the dividends pay off from investing in these properties and getting 10%. So moving on, we're gonna go much quicker now, because I'll just touch on the key points here. So again, this is the 4001 program on page 2. So 13 River Talbot and your scattered family units. Everything I've talked about here, I talked about on the first page, except I'll draw your attention to the box on the bottom left. What that is that new cap plus exemptions, that's your new budget for the year. So the Department of Housing increased the budget by 12% this year. It's actually the same amount as last year, 12%, and then 2 years ago was 10%. So in the 8 years I've been doing, this is the first time we've seen double-digit percentage increases 3 years in a row. Prior to that, 1%, 0, and 2, pretty horrendous increases. So I think really, if you average out almost the last 6 years, they're kind of increasing housing authorities at a 5% rate on average. And that's kind of where they are keeping up with the cost of living adjustment overall. You know, certainly there's been ebbs and flows, but I think they've realized, especially in the last 3 years, the costs were certainly outpacing what they were paying in their old budgets. So now bringing it up into the low teens of paying, 12, 13% increases is finally hopefully getting housing authorities on, I hesitate to say stable ground. You never know, but that's really where we're at. And then the under over cap, second line there at the bottom, that's how much of your budget you're spending. So you're not under the cap, you're not over the cap, that would be negative, you're under. So when I think of that as you're not spending 73,000 on normal operating expenses for the year, that can either go to non-routine expenses, or you can bank that into your reserves. Either way, that's a good sign. It's not like you need your entire budget just for one-time expenses during the year. And as you can see on the right, you're starting out the year at 33%. Honestly, you ended last year at 36. It's only down to 33% because the expenses in the budget are much higher than last year. But right now you're healthy, you're over 35%, even as of this month. And then we're projecting you to be at 38%. So moving on to page 3, I won't spend a ton of time here. This is your actual budget calculation, how to do it. So you'll see line 3, I mentioned it's the 12% increase in your budget. What that means dollar-wise, that's a $63,000 increase in your budget from last year. And then I'll call your attention to line 8. Line 8, these are one-time exemptions where they will give you the money dollar for dollar for what you're spending it on. You get a very small exemption for your air source heat pumps. I believe one of the, might be the Talbot, maybe the community room, where you have your air source heat pumps, there's 4 of them, is it in Talbot? So you get like $300 a year to service that, it's not a lot. But we don't want to leave that money on the table. If we put it in here, they'll give you $1,200. And the other one is you did have a legal settlement this year. So the way legal settlements work is you have a deductible of $3,000, you pay the first $3,000, and then the Department of Housing reimburses whatever the rest of the settlement is. So that's just a dollar for dollar offset. Moving on to page 4. This is 16 River. Not a lot that I'll point out here. We have the expenses going up 10%. The revenues keep going up at a higher rate than contract rents. But you can see on the bottom left, even with 323,000 in non-routine expenses, sizable number, still making a net income of almost 150,000. So not a lot to talk about here. It's one of your most healthiest programs, and that kind of makes sense. Every year you're getting a boost to the contract rents that the HUD is paying. The 689 program. So we have actually kind of maneuvered a little bit here. This is a program that we were slowly eating away at the reserves, and we still are. So the operating expenses are projected to go down 3%. Now that may seem like a lot, but in reality, that's like $2,000. It's such a small program. Small fluctuations here will big in percentages. So overall, your net income before non-routine is 7,100. So it's making it's holding its own on an annual basis. And then you have non-routine expenses. So if those come to fruition, you're really just spending reserves. If not, you're banking the reserves again. And it's well over 170% reserves. Page 6, this is Mason and Glenside. I apologize, there's an error at the top. It's now 4 units, not 3. So I'll correct that for next year. We do have the expenses going up about 19%. Now that this program has an extra unit, it's also starting to generate decent income. It should hold its own and cover a lot more of its costs. So it is. And even with that, it's still generating a net income of 32,000. So hopefully you'll see that every year and start building up a decent reserve like the other program. Page 7, your Section 8 program. Again, you don't own anything here. You're vouchers for landlords. I will point out on basically the revenue side at the top, you'll see your rate per month per voucher is $141. So really, this is the biggest driver of what we can spend in this program, because you don't actually get 141 every single month. the federal government loves to prorate things and give you a percentage of it. So the percentage was a record high last year of 97%. It's now sitting at 92%. And as you can imagine, with a new legislator in place, both the House and Senate right now, vastly different on what the 2025 rate is going to be. One of them has it at like 95 and one has it at 81. So I don't know where it's going to fall. So I'm just sticking with the rate that it is right now, 92%. If it ends up being higher, this program will do better. If it ends up being lower, we might just need to figure out, can it absorb slight temporary decrease in its revenue so that next year we'll be evaluating the budget. So we're always kind of playing catch up with this program. All right, so these are just, next page will be individual types of expenses. So page 8, here's your admin salary. So normally I just tell you what this went up because it's governed by the Department of Housing's budget guidelines. But there's a little wrinkle here that we now have Tia Similaris. She's on here as kind of a part-time / full-time position. It's enough where it's going to be budgeted here rather than the seasonal help in the maintenance side. And then we've also added Erica there as finance director. So with moving things around, I know Bob had kind of led it off with his intro, you're allowed to increase the admin salaries by 9%, just like the maintenance salaries. So we've had to move things around to kind of fit the positions here. So again, it's kind of exactly what Bob said, all the pieces of the puzzle are there. We just need to figure out how they work together. But everything works with this kind of new administrative structure. And hopefully that'll help Bob and his team alleviate some of the bottlenecks and things that they were struggling with on the admin side. Page 9. So these are your other admin costs, really to catch all for things like travel, all of your office expenses, postage, training, your website, all of your softwares, everything. I'll only point out 3 things here. At the top, your legal budget. Now I had always, but legal in this industry is really starting to take off. It's exploding because a lot of what happened during the pandemic was moratoriums on evictions. Now, state really wants housing authorities to catch up with their evictions, which obviously means legal costs are going to increase. So last year I budgeted $16,000 for legal. Your actual expense last year was $34,000. So naturally, that was double what I budgeted for. I've now bumped your budget up to $32,000. It seems like it's trending a little less this year. We're already almost 6 months into this year. So I'm hopeful that maybe the legal costs will stabilize and start going down, because it really is an expense that doesn't add a lot of value overall to the housing authority's budget. Moving down on other administrative, your section 8 management fee. I just point out that Dedham receives 60% of your admin fees and the housing authority retains 40%. So what does that really mean? It's about $56,000 a year that you're paying Dedham to honestly manage a program that's very difficult based on the size of the program, to have somebody in-house full-time to work on the program, and it really requires that. So outsourcing that to Dedham Housing Authority, where they have the expertise to handle all sorts. They handle honestly about 15 part-time programs, from other housing authorities. So, you're in good hands when it's like Allstate, you're in good hands with Dedham Housing Authority. And then the legal settlement, I mentioned it's second from the bottom. I just want to point out, that's a one-time item that shouldn't be there again next year, barring you having another legal settlement. Your maintenance and labor costs. So normally the only thing I say here is put in the Department of Labor rates and let's move on. So the Department of Labor rates have been the last 3 years pretty atrocious. It's been like a few pennies here, as Bob said, not keeping up with the cost of living adjustment. So what Department of Housing has decided is that this entire section can go up by 9% from last year. Now, and then they've kind of left it up to us to figure out how. So I have budgeted for the maximum here of a 9% increase, and it was up to us to figure out, on-call went up $50 from last year, from $200 to $250. How much is the seasonal help going to go up? How much is overtime going to go up? And then the rest of it, we can get to salaries. So we have bumped the maintenance salaries up to 5%. And while that may seem like a lot compared to past years, honestly, they got 1% last year, 2% the previous one. So I think the Department of Housing will hopefully keep this trend going forward, try to make the maintenance guys whole for the last 3 years where they didn't even get really cost of living adjustments. That's my theory. Don't quote me next year when they completely change the process again. Page 11. So maintenance supplies, nothing much here. I'll mention that your maintenance supplies last year were around $225,000. I budgeted it at $206, slightly below that because you're kind of trending in that direction for 6 months. And then last year, your contract costs, so third-party contract work is $313,000. I budgeted for $311, so pretty spot on. And it all fits within the budget. Page 12 are your insurance policies. So I always point out here what the state insurance rate goes up. The state pools all housing authorities together to get a better rate. And they honestly do a good job of getting a better rate because your 60 River Street came out of that portfolio, had to get its own property insurance, and then that rate doubled. So the state rate went from $272 per unit to $292 per unit. It's only $20 increase. You probably don't remember, but last year I was kind of fuming about, it went up from $204 last year, to $272. It was almost a 40% increase. So this year having, basically a less than 10% increase in the rate is a good sign that maybe the insurance rates have stabilized a little, until the next major storm that wipes out housing. The employee benefits on page 13. So what I always say here is, most of this is out of the control of the housing authority. The retirement board determines your retirement costs. The group insurance commission determines the insurance costs. Medicare, FICA, those are federal laws. So really the only thing you can control is your hiring of employees. So what I like to point out is, where do you fall with your employee benefits as a percentage of your salaries? And it's a really broad range. I see housing authorities on the low end being at 25%. So for every dollar of salary, they have about 25 cents of benefits, and as high as 60%, which thankfully you're not there. You're hovering between the 36% and 40% range. So you're kind of smack dab in the middle. So every dollar of salary you add about 40 cents of employee benefits. So a reasonable place to be. It's nice that, again, you guys are kind of stable there. You haven't really gone up and fluctuated a lot in that regard. And page 14. So this is a more in-depth review of your non-routine costs. And honestly, a lot of this is very fluid. Bob and I try to figure out what's likely to happen. Some of these are carryovers from last year, but if something else comes up, certainly we can pivot, spend it on that item, keep these in for next year's budget. So again, just to give you a sense of where these costs are. I will say your actual costs last year were much lower than this. On the 4001, we're budgeting 97. Last year you were at 72. 16 River, I don't think Bob spent any money. We had budgeted, a lot last year. He only spent 16 on non-routine. But we had 323 in there, so you're gonna have to pick up the spending there. And then the 689 last year was 12,000. Actual non-routine we're budgeting 70. So that's really it on the housing authority budget. So any questions you have, anything you want to go over?
Any questions? No. No.
I would say a roll call.
Sure. So I'll.
Safe side. I think one last comment, 30 seconds is that 38%. That's a key focus here. Because, you need to end up at no less than 35. And a lot of housing authorities are struggling.
Yeah, so I didn't mention it because it doesn't impact your housing authority, but for housing authorities that are below the 35%, in this budget cycle, they promised to give them enough funds, this is the Department of Housing, to get them up to 35%. And they've done this before. This is about 6 years ago they did it. It seems to be every 6 to 7 years, housing authorities kind of drain their reserves down, need kind of a boost to get back up. So I would say, a good maybe 33%. Housing authorities right now are below 35% on the state, required code, which isn't a great sign, but as the state legislator, the entire state legislation keeps sending more money to the Department of Housing. They're at least able to bring housing authorities back up to that required reserve. So, we've done a good job of keeping you guys right at the required amounts, so reserves aren't going through the roof, but also they're not dropping below that level. So I don't think it'll impact you, unless you dip slight below it, maybe you'll get a little funds to get back to 35% reserve, but it's a good point that right now housing authorities are really struggling to keep the reserves up.
All right, so unless there's a question, I'll take a motion.
Okay, Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 2025 budget that's before us today.
Second. Okay, by roll call, Marty? Aye. Jim? Yes. John, yes.
Oh, thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much, Paul.
Paul, thanks.
Yes.
That's all.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.
Sure.
Lot shorter than him.
Investment accounts, anything new here, Bob? No, it's on the inside.
You did the minutes, right?
Yeah,
Nope, it's been on file, I think,
Very good, placed on file. Section 8 voucher,
no, the next one is the
payment of bill.
payment of bills for the period, and I know the last meeting, Commissioner O'Donnell questioned $197 for me. And notice there's $1,799 this time around. Those are charges on my credit card for repair of stove, parking in court, lunches for the, guests of the sheriff that do work here, dishwasher repair. Bulk pickup of a recliner, a mattress, things like that, so. And the monthly cell charge of $25 has been the same for 9 years, it's not increased. So that's the reason why that's $1,799.77, and, you know, I don't submit an expense from my credit card, fees or anything. But other than that, if there's any question, what's gonna happen was, maybe almost 2 months in the year, it floats, generally around 5,000 to 8,000, you can hope. Just looking down for any other big charges, CBIZ on page 2. And above CBIZ, that's the auditors, used to be Markham, now they're CBIZ, I don't know how they came up with that name. And, page 3, Marshall Daughter Body, that's the old white truck that was purchased. When you were going in, the body had rusted out. And so we replaced the body, and, there's a coating union, that's the truck that will be using salt, sand, so, you know, it won't rot the bodies of new vehicles, that vehicle's 10 years old. So that's it. Any questions, I mean, what I have to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the payment of the bills before us from 11/1/2024 to 11/30/2024.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Section 8 voucher report in front of you, $90,656. We went to vote, page 3, you can see there are no adjustments like some previous months for fraud, you know, repayments or anything like that.
Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the payment of the section 8 bill to Dedham Housing Authority in the amount of $90,656.78.
Second. Motion second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. 3-0. Conference report.
Conference report is. Any questions, or we don't have the answer. You just go to the.
Page 3?
Yep.
And the percentage?
Yep, 58%, so you can see where, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the focus of this one.
Cool. And that is a place on file, thank you.
Yep.
Payroll report.
Payroll for November,
There we go.
in front of you, that requires a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the payroll report from November 7th, 2024 through November 28th, 2024.
Second. All in favor, aye? Opposed? 3-1. Vacancy report, are there any questions?
Vacancy report, you can see total of 3. First one, vacancy. Resident passed away. Second one, resident moved to a nursing home. And the third one was a transfer. And I believe it just gets put on file.
Yep.
Any questions?
That-
Just want to have the answer.
Executive Director's report.
Okay, director's report, couple of things, the administrative actions, I looked at this, no issues here, but been hearing some, comments that some folks are reading into this and trying to figure out, you know, who was caught up in this getting administrative action, so I think what I'm gonna do on some of the administrative action one, I'll report to the board any administrative action once it's concluded in housing court. I think that's better, you know, I don't want people running around here trying to guess, was it Sonia that they were suing or
Are
Don?
you saying that the people hear this in this
They're
meeting?
trying to figure
And
out
then
what
they go
tenants
and try to
are
figure it out.
being
Gotcha.
here, you know, but it shows you here, we had an order was granted for execution, which means an eviction. And the tenant appeal was granted a 30-day compassionate extension. So by the end of December, that will be resolved one way or the other. Like, in any case, when you go to court for these, you go in with a motion to evict, and you have sit in negotiations and discuss it, come up with an agreement. You know, people that have gone through that process, that's the process. There are people that have gone and attended, and, you know, they see that process. So, you know, just because you go in and say eviction doesn't mean when you have court a judgment with an agreement that you lost, it means that that's the resolution. Is coming to an agreement to address that problem. The next one is a rent issue. They haven't paid the rent, so we're going to housing court. Same with the third one. The fourth one, it's a lease violation. And legal action there is pending. We had a resolution of 13 River Street, some squatters in a vacant apartment. Commissioner Conway would know you'd have to proceed with an eviction, you can't just throw them out, but they're now out of there. But that's the administrative action. So as I say, going forward, I'll report actions that have been adjudicated in court. So that I won't be saying, hey, we're going to doing this for this one, and we issued a warning or whatever to that. We'll leave it alone until it's finally settled. Smoking, time of the year, winter, complaints increase because people smoke inside. Although if someone complains to me and they put it in writing, and I go to a resident and say, gee, I'm getting complaints that you're smoking inside. Oh, that's not true, but you never see them outside. You know, which is interesting. I think frankly that when people smoke, it shows a total disregard for their neighbors. Because, you know, people here have compromised immune systems, and secondhand smoke bothers them. Secondly, with the 52 people, but, you know, people don't seem to care, so they continue and continue. I mentioned RAF. For the modernization project, we're moving along with them all. The second one down the Travel Cove roof, weather permitting, they're gonna start it tomorrow. They believe they can fix the roof here in one day. It's good. There were trees growing out of the gutters, so it's good that that can be taken care of. Video system, all that. That's the report, but I do want to point out when you mentioned the tenant board member, that if you recall, we had that occur this motion is appointment, and the board came up with a policy, and you know, it was good, so we clarified that, so there's no errors being made. And what will be happening now is tomorrow there'll be a memo that's distributed indicating that there is a vacancy, and notices will be posted in the common room at Talbot, 13 River Street and 16 River Street. Every resident will receive a notice. It'll be posted, I say, on our website. We also have to send it to, you know, obviously everyone's in one of the houses here. And we have to send it to everyone that has a Section 8 voucher. There were 61 at the time, as of today, that are in there. So, you know, we'll be going to towns like Fitchburg, Leominster, and all that, but we're required by that law to send it to anyone that's getting any subsidy through the Worker Housing Authority. And as it says in the memo here, you have, it's going to be provided to all residents, that be considered, you have to submit your name to the town clerk within 30 days of the receipt of the notice. Contact information from the town clerk was provided. And you know, once a person is appointed, it's appointed by the select board. There's some training they have to complete, and there's, you know, it's offered online through the state. And so, you know, that's what the notice will say, and it will go out to all folks. And did I give you a copy of it?
No.
No,
I'm reading something you don't have.
all right, already told us about it.
Mhm.
No.
Oh, yeah, this is just the notice. Just going out, it's similar to the notice you had. And it's your policy. Should the town not receive any names from tenants within 60 days of the notice, the select board can appoint an eligible tenant member. To it. If there is no eligible tenant member willing to serve, then the housing authority can seek a waiver from the requirement to be a tenant board member. So that's the rule, that's what we'll do. All the stuff will be launched tomorrow, notified the residents of the policy now that was voted, we won't have that. Which, I wanted to bring that up, and if anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to answer that. On that, so,
Any questions? No.
I'm sorry,
All right,
no question?
all right.
Um,
New business, let's see, Shawshene Tech donation.
yes, as you know, the Shawshene Tech helped build, Mason Ave. We had, Denise and Jennifer donated time sort of part of the works. All that sort of stuff. There were three groups from, Shawshene Tech Carpentry Group, the electrical group, the plumbing group. And based upon the fact that, I think, number one, through Richie's oversight, and also because we got it through the Shawshene Tech students, we saved money. That house was built, for $300,000, we already own the land. So what I'm asking the board here to do, we use the Shawshene Tech frequently throughout the year for projects. Is to approve a donation of $6,000 to the Shawshene Tech, which they will split up 2,000. 2,000 for the electrical group and 2,000 for the plumbing group. In recognition of, what they did for us and our appreciation. And, frankly, we call them frequently, and there's a couple of things that we have irons in the fire for them to do for us continually. So I would respectfully ask the board to approve the suggested motion. Answer any questions that you have.
In recognition of the support of the Shawshene Tech and a grateful appreciation for their assistance constructing the new home at 14 Mason Ave, I move that the Baraga Housing Authority donate the sum of $6,000 to the Shawshene Technical Vocational School. This sum is to be equally divided among the carpentry, plumbing, and electrical groups at $2,000 each.
Second.
All in favor, aye, opposed, we will go.
I will arrange some kind of a presentation the way they want it. And we'll, next,
Blanchard Ave,
sorry,
Blanchard Ave parcel,
yeah, Blanchard Ave parcel. If you're sitting here, I'll give you a map. If you look at this map that I gave you, right, we're over here. So you're looking at our parking lot. Opposite the maintenance building, main maintenance building, are our dumpsters. This land that we're talking about here, behind those dumpsters, and it belongs to the house. It's here. I've met with those people, and they're agreeable to sell that chunk of their land to the housing authority. We did the survey, came up with this, it's roughly about 13,000 square feet. It was explained to me, this is more of a marathon, not a sprint. They have to go to their bank to make sure the bank approves splitting of a lot. Then we have to go to the ZBA, we have to go to the planning board and all that. But ultimately, we've come up with a number which is in there, $18,000. I've spoken to a couple of people. What's the number? There's really no frontage there for them to, you can't construct a house there, there's no way to get to. What we would like to do is by owning that land, is cut enough trees to be able to put a 2-bay garage in there. So that we can put in our sander and plows, lawnmowers, stuff like that. We have a riding thing here that used across the street, people smell gas in this building, and it's not the smartest thing to have it in this building. So that's our intention. Long range is once we get our hands on the property. We can have a 2-bay like garage built. The tech built, the green building this year, so we go to the tech. And see if they would be willing to build, garage, so this is not something that if you approve, it's gonna happen tomorrow.
So I guess my question is the vote that we're gonna be taking on this, is it to approve the $18,000 for the purchase? Or is it to approve you moving forward? Because I guess there's other housekeeping items the other person has to.
Well, I would ask you to approve the purchase of the land for 18,000. And, we've spent, I think. 4,000 for surveying. We'll probably spend, it's gonna spend 2,000 for legal fees. So I would ask that you approve the purchase of the property for 18,000 and we can execute any documents with. Just
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve the amount of $18,000 for purchase of land at 15 Blanchard parcel.
All in favor? I opposed 301. Talbot Roof Project,
sorry?
the Talbot Roof Project, we just
Oh,
voted.
yeah. You've approved the change in boiler system. Coming around the final payment. And it's done, and I'd ask that you approve it. We have to then sign it and send it to the state. So that we can get paid, we can get $28,326.03. That we can then send to the contractor.
And this is a roll call, so.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be a roll call.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that the Brookline Housing Authority Board of Commissioners approve the certificate of final completion for the Talbot Roof Project number 031083 and authorize payment number 3 in amount of $28,326.03. Additionally, the board authorizes the executive director to execute any necessary documentation related thereto.
Second. I have a motion and a second by roll call vote. Commissioner Conley,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Sonia, yes, 3-0.
Thank you very much. Let you folks know. I'll be leaving next Thursday, as we do annually for Christmas. I'll be coming back Sunday the 29th.
You coming back?
Yeah, really? Well, Mr. O'Donnell, Commissioner O'Donnell's just away from back.
Yeah.
And, the office here will be closed, obviously Wednesday, for Christmas, Thursday and Friday. It'll be posted on the door of the office, it'll be closed those days, and then, New Year's the following week, it'll be closed for New Year's Day.
Okay.
And want to wish the board, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, hopefully, the way it goes, the January meeting will have the governor's appointee, sitting here, Mr. Gabriel Rowdy. Wish you all Merry Christmas.
You as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Do we want to go to the meeting schedule?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, first, yeah, so the next meeting will be January 9th, and then February 13th, and then we'll leave it at that. And then open mic, there are no one's signed up, so
I forgot you. There is something I want to say. Okay,
Well, he didn't sign
hold
up.
on just a second.
He didn't sign up. Or let him speak if you want, it's up to you.
Go right ahead.
okay. 2 weeks ago, something like that. I was, I said, testifying at the court. Before I testified, I was intimidated, witness intimidation. I'm not mentioning names here. Didn't tell Bob because, anyways, but anyway, I was intimidated. So I changed my mind, and I decided I was gonna go anyhow, right? And I wore my suit and tie, and I gave my story. I don't like it when they tell you that you're a liar. When I'm not a liar, I told exactly what I saw, and I have no stake whatsoever in anybody being found guilty or not guilty. It had no stake in it at all. I was just telling what I saw.
Okay, very good.
Did the president call the lawyer?
Yeah,
I mean, it was in a court, right? So, I mean, that's kind of like out of the jurisdiction of us. But-
Were you in the courtroom?
No, he was in,
Oh,
I
it's-
don't know what we're doing.
I told the magistrate.
Yeah.
That witness intimidation, I couldn't even hesitate.
You told the right person.
Person was intimidating me, and she said. So I'm not gonna mention names.
Okay.
But nobody has a right to tell me what I can do, and what I can't do when it comes to court. Cause I'm not gonna commit perjury for anybody. Friends and no friends, even my family, I tell the truth, I even told them that. Nobody tells me I can't tell a lie in court, I'm telling the truth, exactly that.
Okay,
Can I
good.
just need 15 seconds on that?
No. Shoot.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor, opposed,
Merry Christmas,
we're
everyone.
adjourned.
Happy New Year.
Please be safe. Legal right.